Welcome to Hope Natural Health, the podcast inspiring you to be your best version. Join me, your host, Dr. Erin, naturopathic doctor, dog mom, cancer survivor, and girl boss weekly as we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Welcome back. Last week, we discussed anxiety in the body with guest Daniel Packard. And today I have another guest because we're on a roll with guests. I have Whitney Prude here. She is a practicing board certified clinical pharmacist, as well as a Mayo Clinic certified wellness coach and nationally certified health and wellness coach. Whitney is also certified in medication therapy management and pharmacogenomics. She currently works part-time as an inpatient clinical pharmacist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where she has been for 7 years. She is a public speaker, entrepreneur, and CEO of Whole and Happy Living, where she helps individuals truly transform their life from the inside out while also losing weight in a way that can be maintained long term. Welcome to the show, Whitney.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to this discussion today. We're going to be talking about nutrition and meal planning, but you've got a lot of credentials and a lot of background. So let's talk a little bit more about your background and how you got into your current work.
Well, it's something that I never expected to be doing. So how I got here, I guess, is kind of a long story and a story that I didn't really want for myself, I guess. But I was working as a pharmacist, and about 9 months into my job, I started to get a pain in both of my wrists and, using the computer, dispensing medications. And so very quickly from that point, I thought I'd be able to just like let my wrists heal and be okay. And within about 2 months, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and I was very severely sick, fatigued, in a lot of pain, and really, couldn't hardly do my job anymore. So I was 28 years old. I had $200,000 of debt hanging over my head for in student loans. And I said, oh crap, what do I do now? So that was really where I started diving into health and wellness coaching, public speaking. Those were things that I always wanted to do, and I never knew if I would actually end up doing them or not. So it was kind of a dream of mine. And I said, well, I guess, if it's something that I can do and I can build a business and pull myself out of this hole, then, maybe that's what ends up working for me. And so I did create my business, Whole and Happy Living. And the rest is history.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. Most of the guests and even myself, it's like we didn't plan on the career that we're actually in. And it usually takes some sort of journey of our own to really, find that passion to do what we're doing now. So I appreciate you sharing that. You and your company, the Whole and Happy Living, you have a 5-step power plan to whole health transformation. Can you dive into what exactly is that and the power plan?
Yeah, for sure. So what I try to do with our company is I try to take a really whole approach, a holistic approach to health. And the reason that I do that is because in the weight loss and diet industry, there's all kinds of quick fixes, bandages, pills, whatever, right? That people lose a bunch of weight and then they gain everything back, and then some. And so really what I tried to create is an approach that would actually help people to really create a lifestyle and something that they can maintain long term while also getting the weight off. So that 5-step power plan, that really includes, it includes the power of the mind. So understanding how our brains work, getting into like the nitty gritty, right? It's like when we've gained a bunch of weight, when do we ever ask the question, like, how did I actually get here? Why am I here? And why am I staying stuck? Right? We usually just say, I need to go on a diet. We change our food, take a pill, whatever. And we're never looking at like, what's actually below the surface and what's
Mm-hmm.
driving my behavior? Like, why am I here?
Yeah.
And so we really take people through this process of, the mental and emotional aspects that are keeping them stuck. What are the barriers? What are their triggers? Helping them to increase their awareness, build themselves up inside. A lot of times people, they don't stay motivated
Mm-hmm.
long term if they're not motivated internally. Like if we have
Mm-hmm.
external motivation, like we want to look better, we don't want people to think poorly of us, that we're unhealthy, that we're overweight, we want to meet other people's expectations, whatever it is, or we're afraid of our health in the future. Those are all external types of motivation. And what we really want to do is we want to transition to internal motivation, which is that
Mm-hmm.
we want to live healthy just because we care about ourselves and we care
Yeah.
about our bodies, and that it's actually a number one priority for us. And so
Mm-hmm.
the power plan is really, it includes everything. It includes the mental and emotional piece. It includes, education, nutrition education, awareness, knowing the things that we're doing, paying attention to our body, knowing how to listen to our
Mm-hmm.
bodies, and ultimately become our best selves so that we can live our best life. So creating a lifestyle that actually becomes a part of who you are, and that's why you live it.
Oh, awesome. Sounds so easy, right?
No.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about weight loss, why do you think, or why is it that women try diet after diet after diet and they still can't seem to lose weight?
I say a very large percentage. I like to say, like 99% of people, it's all
Mm-hmm.
mental and emotional. So
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that everyone that we bring into our program, there's always something underlying. There's something that's
Mm-hmm.
driving your behavior. There's something that is causing you to make the decisions that you're making. And most
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize why we're actually doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and ultimately, when we dive into it, it all comes down to, why have I put myself on the back burner? And in our culture and society, just as human beings in general, we often put ourselves on the back burner because it's a lot easier to let ourselves down than to let other people down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when we feel like we're disappointing other people, right, it's harder to deal with than, disappointing ourselves, where it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a, like repercussions right off the bat. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, whatever, move
Yeah.
on. But a lot of it actually comes from our past experiences, whether that's our childhood or any traumatic experiences that we've been through,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever causes us to abandon ourselves. So a lot of times, just to give you like a very common example, let's say someone was raised in an environment where their parents were either, or one, even one parent was narcissistic, or they were an alcoholic, or they never had anything good to say about the child, or you couldn't live up to their expectations, maybe with
Mm-hmm.
religion or something, or very, very high expectations. And what we do as kids is we start to try and survive. We start to try and figure out, right? It's like, how do I get noticed? How do I get my needs met? How do I get somebody to be proud of me and to love me?
Mm-hmm.
And so we start doing things to feel loved and to feel needed
Mm-hmm.
and to fill that void that's inside of us. And so
Yeah.
we might become people pleasers. We might become caretakers. We might become overachievers at work because then we get noticed and people are proud of us. And
Yeah.
so it's just, people never realize how we develop the behaviors that we do and where they come from. And oftentimes, when we're putting ourselves on the back burner, we're not taking care of our health, we're not exercising, and a lot of times even food will become a coping mechanism. So we're eating whenever any type of emotion or stress or anything comes up, and before we know it, we've got a bunch of weight on.
Yeah.
But if you don't address the underlying things, you're always going to come back to where you were, because
Mm-hmm.
your emotions are driving your behavior.
Yeah. So I would assume that's the first place that you recommend someone start is, digging deep. Is that true?
Yeah, so that's where, I mean, ultimately, that's where we start in our
Mm-hmm.
program. The first 4 weeks of our program is, diving into the mental and emotional stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we do still start nutrition at the very beginning. And that's because that's what people want. That's what they came for. They're like, help me lose weight. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
we will. We'll start that off at the very beginning, right? But at the same time, we're going to start addressing some of the things that are underlying so that we don't
Hmm.
get, 2 months into the program and you end up cycling back because we haven't addressed any of the things that are actually causing you to get where you are.
Yeah. With your diagnosis of autoimmune, did you find that there was, some mental emotional components to that?
Yeah. So, and that's an unfortunate part of my story that I left
Hmm.
out. So,
Sorry to bring it up,
um,
but I'm sure it's helpful.
nope, you're just fine. So, really and truly, my story kind of started back when I was 16. So my parents went through, what I considered, as a teenager to be a very like nasty, devastating divorce, right? It was very traumatic for me. And a lot of, my closest relationships in my life fell apart. My world fell apart
Hmm.
essentially. And at that point, I didn't know how to deal with it. Nobody teaches us how to deal with like these types of things in life.
Right.
And so I did what most human beings do. And I tried to just just bury the pain and the hurt and move on, try to survive, right? You have
Hmm.
to go on with life. And so what I did, I remember one day in particular actually that I decided that I wasn't going to use this divorce or this hard experience as an excuse to essentially make poor decisions and ruin my life. So
Hmm.
decided that I wasn't going to let it keep me from my dream of becoming a pharmacist. And I knew that very early on, that that's what I wanted to do. And so what I did is I just buried myself in busyness. I buried myself in overthinking. I buried myself in school, and essentially just trying to reach my dream. And it kept me
Yeah.
distracted. Like I didn't have to be present inside of myself because I was so busy focusing on so many other things.
Mm.
And, people would notice me and be like, oh my gosh, look at everything that she's accomplishing. She's so smart. She's blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. Right? And that would make me feel good. And so that was my survival. Right.
Mm.
But essentially, I pushed myself beyond my limits. And there were several moments as I was going through pharmacy school where we started to wonder, like what is actually going on with my body, and am I developing, something? And so I had gone multiple times, and everything was always negative. But I just kept pushing. I kept
Hmm.
pushing and kept pushing, and finally, everything crumbled.
Yeah.
And here I am. So whether it's we gain weight and we end up with diabetes or high cholesterol or high blood pressure,
Hmm.
we end up with autoimmune disease, we end up, who knows? But the reality is that if we don't address the things that we've been through and that we go through on a mental and emotional level, those things stick with us until we do.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, when people go through really challenging experiences, down the road they will manifest. It just depends on what kind of brings everything to the surface.
Yeah. Well, happy to hear. And I would assume that since you worked through that, like I would assume your autoimmune condition is, dormant or highly manageable at this point, correct?
So it's manageable, but I have a lot of limitations that I have to live within. So I stopped working as a pharmacist just because it
Mm.
would make me sick. It would cause me to flare. So I'm only working within my business. That's more manageable, but I still I can't walk very far. So
Mm.
I use a scooter a lot. If we go on vacations, we always rent a scooter for me and rent a
Hmm.
car to haul it around, and take a wheelchair through the airport and use scooters at the grocery store.
Hmm.
So I still have a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
My life will never be the same as it was.
Hmm.
And so it's just a matter of knowing, what are my limitations? How do I
Hmm.
accept the things that I can't change? And
Yeah.
still, try to do my best to have a fulfilling life, whatever that is for me now.
Right. Good attitude. What is the autoimmune condition?
So it's a combination between rheumatoid arthritis and lupus.
Lupus.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and so both of those run in my family, and
Mm.
rheumatology is so hard to,
Yeah.
with getting like diagnoses and stuff. So
Yep.
everybody's still confused about what it is, but
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. For
yeah.
those that are super busy and they don't really, I mean, they probably know that they need to dive into the mental emotional component, but they also know that they want to make a change. They're busy. What would be your best advice for this demographic of people?
Yeah. So with busy professionals, it's tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially, it's like you get into people that really, it's like CEOs or attorneys or like those jobs that are just like
Yeah.
crazy, crazy busy. Those are really hard
Mm-hmm.
to really put in the time. But you just have to start chipping away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a matter of like, can I load in all of this other stuff to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to get through the mental and emotional things? But it's one of the biggest things for really busy people is saying no and starting to set boundaries in certain
Mm-hmm.
areas. A lot of times people don't realize that they can actually say no
Mm-hmm.
to certain things, or a lot of really successful people have a mentality of doing the work themselves because they know how to do it and they know that they'll do it right and they won't have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about it being messed up or whatever. And so
Mm-hmm.
they take a lot of things on themselves that they don't necessarily have to. And it's uncomfortable a lot of times
Yeah.
to either say no to something or to delegate something and be concerned that it's not going to get done right. But you just have to start taking those steps. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
start. I always tell people, like, if you think about your priorities, a lot of people will list out, like, they'll list family at the top, they'll list work at the top, relationships. And a lot of people either won't put themselves on the list at all, or they put themselves at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always try to help people to shift their mindset. Instead of you being off the list or at the bottom of the list, we start to put you at the top of the list. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we take you and you're now above family, you're above work, you're above relationships. You and your health comes first before anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not having the time to take care of your needs and your own health, then other things have to start to be filtered out. You have to start to say
Yeah.
no, right? But when we take care of ourselves, and what a lot of people don't realize is when we are actually taking care of our health, we're eating healthy, we're exercising, we're getting enough sleep, we're doing all of those things that helps us to function at our best, we're more efficient at work. We manage
Mm-hmm.
our emotions better. We deal with people better.
Mm-hmm.
So you're more capable to take on that load because your body
Yeah.
can actually handle it.
Right.
So it is a very challenging situation to be in, but people have to start prioritizing themselves, putting themselves at number one, and start
Mm-hmm.
figuring out where do they start saying no.
Yeah. So important to remember. And it's so easy to forget. And women are notorious for that, especially moms and even,
Yep.
busy entrepreneurs, like they put everybody else first and themselves last. How much of a fan are you of meal planning and planning nutrition?
I mean, I think it's important, but I think that it's different for everyone and everyone's situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, when we do our program, basically what we focus on is how do we help whatever individual we're working with create their own healthy eating lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people where they're like, I don't eat leftovers. No matter what, I can't have leftovers. And
Yeah.
so for that person, it's going to be a little bit different than someone
Right.
who can like bulk prep their protein at the beginning of the week and bulk prep it's like cook some veggies or whatever that they can have for lunches throughout the week. For that person, it's gonna be a different story, right? If you can't
Right.
eat leftovers, we got to find some other solutions if you're really busy and you
Mm-hmm.
don't have a lot of time. So I certainly think that it's important to plan, but you don't have to take an entire day. Like you don't have to take a whole Sunday to plan
Yeah.
all of your meals so that you can get through the week. There are other ways, and my favorite way of doing that is bulk prepping your protein. So if you focus your meals on protein, and let's say, let's say I choose chicken. Okay. So I'm going to make fajitas. And when I cook my chicken, instead of just cooking what like me and my husband or family are going to eat, I'm going to cook 3 times the amount of chicken. whether that's in the crock pot or on the stove. And then I'm going to take what I need for the meal that we're having and what will give us leftovers for maybe lunch and the next dinner. And then the rest of it, I'm going to put either in the fridge or in the freezer. And then I've got,
Yeah.
come our next meal, my chicken's already cooked. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times I'll have veggies that are already cooked. So, well, maybe we pull that out and we just have chicken breast, broccoli, and baked potato one night.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the next night we have, just something else, a chicken salad, cut up the chicken and throw it on some lettuce and we've got our next meal. So you don't have to take an outrageous amount of time
Right.
to be able to plan your meals, cook at home, and eat healthy. It
Mm-hmm.
really takes, there might be one night of the week where you spend maybe 45 minutes to an hour where you're doing, you're really cooking a full out meal. But if you have your
Mm-hmm.
protein already prepped, you can have your meal cooked in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not hard. We just might need to be a little strategic about it up front and have some sort of plan so that you can succeed, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And finding what works in
Right.
each person's situation, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times people try to just jump onto programs and follow
Mm-hmm.
other people's instructions. It's like, can you do the program or not? And
Right.
the reality is that we need to figure out what's going to work in our life and
Yeah.
like what foods do we enjoy, and
Yep.
that's how we're going to be successful long term, not jumping on board with someone's program and saying, just following the instructions that they give you, because eventually you're going to get sick of it and you're going to give up. You have to
Exactly.
create your own eating lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. It's a lifestyle. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we haven't discussed yet that would be helpful for this conversation and the listeners?
I mean, there's a million things,
Right?
there's a ton of stuff. Trying to think if there's just one thing in particular. I always just really try to emphasize the mental and emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just don't realize that it's even a factor.
Yeah.
That, a lot of times, like if I were to advertise for my program and say, you need, I'm looking for people who need mental and emotional help with, to lose weight. People are like, no, I don't need that. Like,
Right. Yeah.
for it,
Yeah.
But if I can get them on a phone call and we can actually have a conversation and we start digging a little bit and I start putting things out, they're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Like, I do have all of these things.
Yeah.
Or, a family member just passed away and I'm eating my sorrows, or,
Mm-hmm.
there's any number of things, but,
Right.
it's like the munching in the evening. Why are you doing
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah.
What are, start thinking about the why behind why
Mm-hmm.
why are you doing what you're doing?
Right.
I always like to tell people to ask themselves 4 questions, and this starts to connect food with the mental and emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell people first to ask, am I hungry? Anytime you're going to food,
Mm-hmm.
right? Am I hungry? That's number 1. The second one is, if you're not hungry, you ask, why am I going to food?
Mm-hmm.
What's the why behind this, right? So then we start digging a little bit. Am I stressed? Am I emotional? Am I bored? Am I,
Mm-hmm.
not wanting to be inside my own head? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
So we start asking why. The third question is, what do I actually need right now? Because if you're not hungry, but you're going to food, then your
Mm-hmm.
body is telling you, I need something,
Mm-hmm.
but that thing is not food. Food is not going to actually meet your need. It's going to cover up the need.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I actually need? If you're stressed, well, you need some rest, relaxation, maybe
Mm-hmm.
meditation, do some breathing exercises, go for a walk, talk it out with a friend, whatever, right? There's all of these tools that we can use to manage those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth question is just that of, what can I do to meet that need? And that's where those tools come into play. So
Mm-hmm.
am I hungry? I'm not. Why am I going to food? What do I really need right now, and how can I meet that need? And you start to separate your physical health and your emotional
Yeah.
health, because
Yeah.
being emotionally distressed does not mean that you have to be overweight.
Nope. I love that. Whitney, it's been so awesome having you here and shedding some light on, the why some of us women struggle with weight loss and nutrition. But we'll wrap this up here with one question I ask all my podcast guests. What is your best or favorite health tip that you can share?
My best or favorite health tip is to keep it simple. We always are looking for another solution. You know, it's like from one diet to the next diet to the next diet. And the reality is we get people in our program and we go to the basics. How are you sleeping? Are you drinking water? Let's talk about nutrition, and get moving. If you do those things, right, and we get all of that in place and you actually put yourself into a deficit in terms of the food that you're intaking and the energy that you're expending, you will lose weight.
Yeah.
It does work. But we have to take care of ourselves. You don't need that miracle pill or that whatever crazy solution. Back to the basics.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for sharing. We will have the link to your program in the show notes, but is there anything else that you wanted to add as we wrap it up?
I mean, the best way to get in contact with me is just to reach out over Instagram.
Okay.
We always are, answering questions over Instagram. And so my handle for Instagram is @MyWholeAndHappyLife.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll make sure to have that in the show notes as well. So Whitney, thank you for being on the show. We look forward to sharing this with the audience, and we'll see you all again next week.